Patton had married a local girl that was born with a bad hip, and she had trouble walking, and or walked funny, I should say. And they had one son who's still living. But at any rate, she had her hips replaced about 3 times in later life, and they ended up in a assisted living out here. And Pat died about 2 years ago, was it, or 3? I forget. Time passes me by. And I had an article published relative to Pat and his early history of the Valparaiso Police Department. And a couple of weeks ago, I thought it would be nice to get a copy to Madeline, and I mailed it out there, and it came back. So I called her sister last week down in South County and got an address, and she's back at a nursing home. Her son took her, and he couldn't handle her. Her legs are so bad she can't get around well. So she's in a nursing home with just bad hips. The rest of her health is okay. And I see Bullis. My wife's stepfather was in a nursing home out here, and Bullis was in the room across the aisle, and I saw him over there and went over, and he didn't even know me. I had to explain to him who I was, and he was telling me he had still a unit at home that he wanted to sell, and I said, well, what is it? He said, I don't know. He says, it gets funny pictures on the front of it. You couldn't even come up with the word oscilloscope. He had Alzheimer's, so awful bad. And the house was sold, and his wife was originally from South Bend, Elkhart area, and she's disappeared. I have no idea whether she's still living or not. Russ Knudsen, if you go back far enough, he left in about 1955 or 56, and went back out west. He was what's those people in Utah? Mormon. Yeah, he was a Mormon, and he went back out into that area to be closer to his church. I would suspect that with our age difference that he's passed on. See who else? Gillespie has died. He had some mental problems, unfortunately, but he had health problems too, and his wife died after that. Gillespie's buried down south on 421 somewhere, I forget that is. And thinking of deaths, I see in the paper this morning an obituary on Bob Farkas and Gary. And Bob's dad was a radio engineer for the city of Gary, and he sent his son over to take his place, and then his son ended up going on to the fire department. But I see he died this morning, and they made no mention of Valpo in the obituary. And who else?
Mr. Bratcher?
Brashear, I have not heard from for years and years. He left school and went with Western Electric or some part of the Bell telephone system over in Illinois as an instructor, and I haven't seen him for 50 years. I don't have any idea on him.
How about Millie, that ran the hut?
Millie, I saw her at Patton's funeral, and what was that? I'll say Patton died 2 years ago. Give it that. I saw her. That's the last time I saw her. She's living in an apartment somewhere and well preserved. Millie has. I give her credit. She's very good looking for being in her 80s. And, very chipper at that time, 2 years ago at least. And who else? Webb developed skin cancer, and he died young. I think young, 70 years old. And, who else?
Caesar?
He came up on the computer here a few weeks ago. I jumped on the telephone. He said, "Hey, I'll be there." He just lives up here a couple blocks. And he was supposed to be here.
Go get him.
Go get him, yeah.
Glenn Figola's on the computer, too.
Yeah, Figola is out in Kansas City doing something. I forget. He appeared out of the midnight. Kirkwood, I have no idea. Wheaton died in bed. I don't know whether I should tell this or not.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
We won't tell anybody.
No, well, it's kind of personal, but I'll tell it. His wife found him dead in bed. she called the undertaker and said, "Come and get Dick, bury him, no announcements, no services, no nothing." And the sheriff showed up. And she got the body back on Friday. So, enough said. As soon as she said that no services, no announcement, why the law enforcement are they're curious on that. So, and last I heard of her, she was living with her sister down in Oklahoma.
Helen Green.
Helen Green had, well, her husband, I think he ended up in a nursing home a little bit, and he's still living. And Helen had an automobile accident somewhere, and when she got hit, she hit the top of her head above her forehead, but forward of her head, and she was never right after that. She wouldn't talk to you. We ran into her in a grocery store and stuff, and she just walked past us, say hi, and you couldn't talk to her, and she was different. And anyway, she ended up in a nursing home, and her husband was in the same nursing home, and he had a stroke, and that made things worse for him. And then she died, and he got so cantankerous that the nursing home kicked him out. And he's over in Maryville now. But he was hard to live with after Helen died. And I don't remember what services they had for Helen. We did not go, so I don't know whether they had services or not.
I think the only one they had was when they had that memorial service over there.
Last fall, before winter started, they had a memorial service over. They rented a room on the other side of town, and went over and had Pepsi and some eats and so forth, and met the family and had a good social afternoon. But I don't know whether they cremated her or not. Do you know, Paul?
No, I don't.
I kind of, it runs in my mind that they had her cremated. Doris Ports, that somebody knew, I had no idea. I haven't heard of her for years and years. Mary Sneckenberger died. She died about 4 or 5 years ago.
What about Gene Wiggins?
I'm still living, I think.
Did you tell the story of Ed?
Of who?
Ed Hirschman.
Who?
Yeah. Ed Hirschman.
I don't know what story there is to tell.
I mean, well, he passed away, and
Ed, my first knowledge of his problems was I was working in the radio station one night on the trouble, and he comes in and he says, "Feel this thing." And I felt it, there was a lump in there. And I said, "Ed, you better get to the doctor." And he held off and held off and held off, and finally he went, and it was cancerous. And he was supposed to go to Chicago for x-ray or treatments, radiation treatments, and they transferred him to Lake County, and according to him, they gave him a 10 times overdose of radiation, and all his teeth rotted, and he wouldn't take care of them, and things just deteriorated from there down. Who else?
Well, keep going about it.
George Mason.
Yeah.
An interesting story. As you know, George had pop bottle bottoms for his glasses, and he read like this and so on. And his wife was, pardon the expression, she was kind of cantankerous. He didn't get along with her and whatnot. But he had to stay married to her because he needed a chauffeur. And so they bought a house on the east side of town and so on and everything. And he quit here and went with Electro Voice up in Niles, Michigan.
Pardon me, what's his name again?
Mason, M-A-S-O-N, George Mason.
He taught op-amps. He taught op-amps.
Early middle 60s.
Yeah, he was a math teacher.
Math,
We had him in '68.
Yeah. At any rate, George left school and went with Electro Voice up in Niles, Michigan. And so I hadn't heard from him for a long time. I was in my office. George comes walking in, and I hadn't seen him for years. I said, George Mason, where'd you come from? He said, oh, I had the day off, so I decided to drive down and look Valpo over. And I said, drive? And he said, yeah. He said, and at that time, there was a eye doctor, ophthalmologist over in LaPorte that was doing some very frontline eye operations that the rest of the industry wasn't doing. And George heard about him, and so he went down and talked to him, and the doctor ran him through the test. He says, I think I can help you. George was born with this problem, whatever it was. And his doctor says, I think I can make you see again. And George thought it over, and he says, okay, you've got one eye to experiment with. So he went through the operation, and it worked. So he waited several months, and went back and had the other operated on, and it was good. On the way home, this is an exaggeration, but on the way home, he stopped, got his driver's license, went home, divorced his wife, got his car, drove down to Valpo. And somebody said that no bid showed up on him. I hadn't heard that at all.
Mr. Wiggins, I'm not sure who posted that. It was one of those perhaps misnomers that happens occasionally on Facebook.
Well, like Keller, they had him dead here. Well, the Michigan City Ham Club, they had him dead. Turned out he's living still. And incidentally, back to Keller, he was one of these guys that went like a sine wave. He was in the ham radio, out of it, into this, out of it, into this, and so on. And now he went to all the expense of vanity call sign, set up a repeater, repeater in Michigan City, closed that out, went south, and gave up his ham license. He's now into black powder target shooting. He shoots those skeets all day and takes them home and cooks them. So.
What other instructor?